Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my April 2022 take of the Would You Read It Challenge. The Would You Read It Challenge is a book tag that was brought to BookTube by @2Brody, and I'll link to that channel down below. I have been utilizing the tag in my own way for the past few months. The purpose is to pick random books and read the first sentence of them, and then ask your audience, would you read this book? But I've decided I don't like that idea too much. You know, I want to give books a little more of a chance, so I do the first couple paragraphs to get a feel for the book. And I decided to come back to this tag and make it a routine by going back in time and attacking a new year per month. So for this month, I am looking at my 2017 reads. It is a bird's eye view of my reading. I picked 12 books that I read in 2017, the first books that I read per month. So this is generally going to be a long video. And as such, I should just get to the point already. I have, the quotes and such on my phone, and I tried to actually go a little shorter than I did the last few times. Sometimes I even stopped randomly in the middle of a paragraph, just doing my thing, I guess. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read these quotes and then just share a little bit about the books with you, like, how I classified them personally on Goodreads, and then give some parting overall thoughts. And I'd love to hear your opinions on these books as well. Okay, 2017, starting with January. Princeton in the summer smelled of nothing, and although Ephemeru liked the tranquil greenness of the many trees, the clean streets and stately homes, the delicate overpriced shops, and the quiet abiding air of earned grace, it was this lack of smell that most appealed to her, perhaps because other American cities she knew well had all smelled distinctly. Philadelphia had the musty smell of history. New Haven smelled of neglect. Baltimore smelled of brine, and Brooklyn of sun-warmed garbage. But Princeton had no smell. She liked taking deep breaths here. She liked watching the locals who drove with pointed courtesy and parked their latest model cars outside the organic grocery store on Nassau Street, or outside the sushi restaurants, or outside the ice cream shop that had 50 different flavors including red pepper, or outside the post office where effusive staff bounded out to greet them at the entrance. She liked the campus, grave with knowledge, the Gothic buildings with their vine-laced walls, and the way everything transformed in the half-light of night into a ghostly scene. She liked most of all that in this place of affluent ease she could pretend to be someone else, someone specifically admitted into a hollowed American club, someone adorned with certainty. But she did not like that she had to go to Trenton to braid her hair. And that comes from Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which I classed as fiction. February. The other day, in looking over my papers, I found in my desk the following copy of a letter sent by me a year since to an old school acquaintance. Dear Charles, I think when you and I were at Eton together, we were neither of us what could be called popular characters. You were a sarcastic, observant, shrewd, cold-blooded creature. My own portrait I will not attempt to draw, but I cannot recollect that it was a strikingly attractive one. Can you? What animal magnetism drew thee and me together, I know not. Certainly I never experienced anything of the Pylades and Orestes sentiment for you, and I have reason to believe that you, on your part, were equally free of all romantic regard to me. Still, out of our school hours we walked and talked continually together. When the theme of a conversation was our companions or our masters, we understood each other, and when I recurred to some sentiment of affection, some vague love of an excellent or beautiful object, whether in animate or inanimate nature, your sardonic coldness did not move me. I felt myself superior to that check then, as I do now. And that's from The Professor by Charlotte Bronte, which I classed as fiction. March. If the 20-year-old Charlotte Bronte had been told that she would one day be a household name, that her picture would hang in a future National Portrait Gallery, and that pilgrims would travel to Haworth on her account from as far away as Japan, she would have been delighted, but not altogether surprised. The image of the Brontes presented in Charlotte's own biographical notice of her sisters casts them as unobtrusive women, shunning fame. But Charlotte's early ambition was not merely to write, but to be forever known. By the time she died at the age of nearly 39 in 1855, she had indeed become a celebrity. 2 years later, with the publication of Elizabeth Gaskell's The Life of Charlotte Bronte, she became a legend. Yet her journey from private individual to public persona was less straightforward than her naive 20-year-old self might have hoped. Instead of a triumphant progress out of obscurity into the light and glory of literary renown, she would travel a tortuous route, characterized as much by evasion and self-effacement as by self-exposure. And that was from The Bronte Myth by Lucasta Miller, which I classed as non-fiction. April. Jerusalem, 1920. The man opposite Prue was trying to force a canary through the train window, and such a hash he made of it. A yellow fluttering blur, black bright accusatory eyes, and then, poof, gone. The empty birdcage on the table in front of him was a perfect dome with a wooden swing in its middle, suspended for a bird to rock and pretend to fly. She longed to touch it, but didn't dare. He hadn't remotely noticed her, despite the fact that they were the only 2 Europeans on the train. Most passengers appeared to be Armenian, Egyptian, Jerusalemites, and others Prue couldn't easily identify. She watched him steadily, hoping he might look over at her, but he never did. His cheeks were awfully red, and he was sweating despite the cold. She guessed he was English. A framed picture on the back of the train stated, "Rapid and comfortable traveling facilities to all parts of Palestine, with connections to Egypt, Syria, and beyond," wherever beyond might be, but the train was not particularly comfortable and had been still for some minutes now. There was no sign of the purser. And that was from The Photographer's Wife by Suzanne Joynson, which I classed as fiction. May. Prologue, 1967. "Hey girl, quiet." "Who is that?" "Be quiet, you woke everyone up." "But I was holding her." "Who?" "On the rock we were sitting together." "What rock are you talking about? Let us sleep." Then she just fell. All that shouting and singing. But I was asleep. And you were shouting. She just let go of my hand and fell. "Stop it, go to sleep." "Turn on a light." "Are you crazy? They'll kill us if we do that." "Wait, what?" "I was singing." "Singing, shouting, everything. Now be quiet." "What was I singing?" "What were you singing?" "In my sleep, what was I singing?" "I'm supposed to know what you were singing? A bunch of shouts, that's what you were singing." Was I singing, she wants to know. "You don't remember the song?" "Look, are you nuts? I'm barely alive." "But who are you?" "Room 3. "You're in isolation too?" "Gotta get back." "Don't go." "Did you leave?" "Wait. Hello." "Gone." "But what was I singing?" And that was from To the End of the Land by David Grossman, which I classed as Jewish fiction. June. Get Back to Happiness. When the destruction of Israel commenced, Isaac Bloch was weighing whether to kill himself or to move into the Jewish home. He had lived in an apartment with books touching the ceilings and rugs thick enough to hide dice, then in a room and a half with dirt floors, under unconcerned stairs, under the floorboards of a Christian who, half a world and 3/4 of a century away, would have a tree planted to commemorate his righteousness. In a hole for so many days his knees would never wholly unbend, among gypsies and partisans and half-decent Poles, in transit, refugee and displaced person camps, on a boat with a bottle that an insomniac agnostic had miraculously constructed inside it. On the other side of an ocean he would never wholly cross. Above half a dozen grocery stores he killed himself fixing up and selling for small profits. Beside a woman who rechecked the locks until she broke them, and died of old age at 42 without a syllable of praise in her throat but the cells of her murdered mother still dividing her brain. And finally, for the last quarter century, in a snow globe quiet Silver Spring split level, 10 pounds of Roman Vishniac bleaching on the coffee table. Enemies, a love story, demagnetizing in the world's last functional VCR. Egg salad becoming bird flu in a refrigerator mummified with photographs of gorgeous, genius, tumorless great-grandchildren. And that was from Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer, which I classed as Jewish fiction. July. The stranger was not quite a stranger. Something in his appearance repelled and yet fascinated Arya Zelnick from first glance. If it had really been the first glance, he felt he remembered that face, the arms that came down to nearly the knees, but vaguely, as though from a lifetime ago. The man parked his car right in front of the gate. It was a dusty beige car with a motley patchwork of stickers on the rear window and even on the side window, a varied collection of declarations, warnings, slogans, and exclamation marks. He locked the car, rattling each door vigorously to make sure they were all properly shut. Then he patted the hood lightly once or twice, as though the car were an old horse you tethered to the gatepost, and patted affectionately to let him know he wouldn't have long to wait. Then the man pushed the gate open and strode toward the vine-shaded front veranda. He moved in a jerky, almost painful way, as if walking on hot sand. And that was from Scenes from a Village Life by Amos Oz, which I classed as Jewish short stories. August. The night Kate Harper decided to burn down the school chapel, she wasn't angry or drunk. She was desperate. Burning down the church was really a last resort. She'd already broken a girl's nose, smoked in the dormitories, cheated on her first exam, and verbally harassed 3 of the nuns. But no matter what she did, St. Agnes Academy kept forgiving her. That was the problem with Catholic schools. They saw her as someone to be saved. But Kate didn't need salvation. She simply needed out. And that was from This Savage Song by V.E. Schwab, which I classed as speculative fiction. September. A Saturday afternoon in the month of November was approaching the time of twilight, and the vast tract of unenclosed wild known as Egdon Heath embrowned itself moment by moment. Overhead, the hollow stretch of whitish cloud shutting out the sky was as a tent which had the whole heath for its floor. The harvest being spread with this pallid screen and the earth with the darkest vegetation, their meeting line at the horizon was clearly marked. In such contrast, the heath wore the appearance of an installment of night which had taken up its place before its astronomical hour was come. Darkness had to a great extent arrived hereon, while day stood distinct in the sky. Looking upwards, a furze cutter would have been inclined to continue work. Looking down, he would have decided to finish his faggot and go home. The distant rims of the world and of the firmament seemed to be a division in time no less than a division in matter. The face of the heath, by its mere complexion, added half an hour to evening. It could in like manner retard the dawn, sadden noon, anticipate the frowning of storms scarcely generated, and intensify the opacity of a moonless midnight to a cause of shaking and dread. And that was from Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, which I classed as fiction. October. Fridays after school, I used to get a nickel from Henye for going with her to the Gray Street Hospital to speak English for her. I was 10 years old, and it was a terrible embarrassment for me to be seen on the street with her. She was so ugly. Henye was a skinny little woman, all bone, no flesh to her. Her hair, which she wore in 2 braids around her head, was the same color as her skin, pallid. Her nose was long, her voice was hoarse, and on top of everything else, she was bent over in the back. And that was from A Basket of Apples by Shirley Faisler, which I classed as Jewish short stories. November. Friday, August 16th, 1935. My lower back ached as I sat, shoulders rounded, hunched over like a number 9 on the wooden stool at my desk at Dover Insurance. I shifted my bottom, unable to find a comfortable position, as I picked up the statement atop the stack. I didn't feel right. I had no fever, but my stomach sloshed and I needed another couple hours of sleep. The digits, though, drew me in, and I became absorbed in the dance of the numbers, the way they could come together and depart, making wonderful new combinations. I didn't initially notice the new girl standing over my desk. "Dottie," she said, prompting me to look up. "Mr. Dover said to ask you if I had problems." She thrust her ledger under my nose. "The totals aren't matching up." I scanned the column, my eye drawn instantly to the error. And that was from Modern Girls by Jennifer S. Brown, which I classed as Jewish fiction. And finally, December. Hush flowers always bloomed when the night was longest. The whole city celebrated the day the petals peeled apart into rich red, partly because hush flowers were their nation's lifeblood, and partly, Akos thought, from keeping them all from going crazy in the cold. That evening, on the day of the blooming ritual, he was sweating into his coat as he waited for the rest of the family to be ready, so he went out into the courtyard to cool off. The Karaseth house was built in a circle around a furnace, and all the outermost and innermost walls curved, for luck, supposedly. Frozen air stung his eyes when he opened the door. He yanked his goggles down, and the heat from his skin fogged up the glass right away. He fumbled for the metal poker with his gloved hand and struck it under the furnace hood. The burnstones under it looked just like black lumps before friction hit them, and then they sparked in different colors, depending on what they were dusted with. And that was from Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth, which I classed as speculative fiction. So my preliminary thoughts are, I obviously was going through a Bronte time in the beginning of the year. I like how, 1 month I was starting by reading Charlotte Bronte's first written book, and then the next month I was reading about basically her legacy, also of her sisters, but I feel like what I remember most is that she was the one who was really gunning for fame and like to be known as publicly as a literary figure. I classed it, I think, as nonfiction because it really was as much about them, the three sisters, as it was about their works. I don't know if I would class it as literary fiction if I did it today, but that's where we are. One of my favorite books of the year, To the End of the Land, was on this list, although I think like a lot of times, the beginning isn't what grabbed me the most with this book. I don't think you'd get to the parts that really got to me by that fleeting prologue. And then the book that followed it was Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer, which I also don't think I liked the beginning that much, but I also didn't generally like the rest of the book too much either. Although, Jonathan Safran Foer is a local guy, or, he has family here, and in fact, that Silver Spring reference, doesn't mean much to most people, I would think, but for me, that's where I live, in a Maryland suburb of D.C., as you do. I even remember reading some of that book in my synagogue, Addis Israel, which is a famous D.C. synagogue, and he set part of the book in that synagogue just with, fake rabbis and all that, so that was kind of weird and disconcerting. Another book I certainly remember distinctly is A Basket of Apples, the short stories, less about because of what was in them, but actually that was the first book I really set myself to reading after my cat Leia died that year, so it's weird how books can have that sort of lingering effect. It's weird too, I think, to be going through this at this particular time when my cat Missy is about to have surgery, although from what I understand now, her situation is far less dire. It should be an easier fix, I believe, and long life ahead, I hope, but it's bringing up all those emotions again, so that's what I'm going through right now, and it's just reminding me of the weird effect books can have on you. I mean, stories have an effect because of what's in them, but also there's sometimes a different effect based on what you're going through. So yeah, and other than that, I had a little bit of Jewish fiction, Jewish short stories, as you do, a little bit of speculative fiction, science fiction, YA stuff, as you do. And going through the Thomas Hardy stuff reminds me that I'm hoping this year to get to a few of his more popular works, hopefully for like Victober or something. So apropos, to remind myself that I actually took part in actually reading Return of the Native that year was a project I embarked on with a fellow booktuber, Curtis Books and Films. I don't believe he makes videos anymore, but at the time I think we were both looking to sort of like, get involved in the community, and we decided to do a read-along together, so that was really fun. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I think most of the books I gave 3 through 5 stars in. I think I ended on a downer note. I think I gave Carve the Mark 2 stars, which is not something I do too often. But anyway, I guess that wraps it up for me now. And if you would like more information about what I thought of these books when I was reading them, I will link to my reviews on Goodreads for all 12 of them down below. And I'll also link to my book tags playlist if you want to see any of the other videos I made in this collection of Would You Read It Challenge videos, or any other book tags or discussions I've done throughout the years. Check them out. I will be back on this channel in the next couple of days to do my latest Am reading video, maybe on Friday, maybe not. We shall see around that time, basically. Stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.